Part 1 of this chapter is going to go through blocking the cloth mask that covers most of our ninja's head. Starting off from where we finished our ninja's face model, I'm going to select the mesh and snap the cursor to selected with Shift S, which will place the cursor at the object's origin. I'm then going to add a circle and just change the vertices to 8. From there I'll rotate and place the circle so that it's facing my front view and its diameter passes near the top of the nose and around the chin area. I'll delete the vertices on the left side of the center, and I'll just go and add a mirror modifier. And next I'll just click the 3 vertice icon, and that will allow me to see the mirroring while I'm in edit mode. From there I'll just begin push and pulling the vertices to match the gas mask that you can see under the cloth in the ninja's concept art. I'm going to also take the opportunity to turn on clipping, which will just make sure that my center vertices won't detach from the mirror point. Forming the base of the gas mask now that is placed over his mouth and nose. I only have the concept art to go by, but I'm doing my best to guess where it is in the front and side plates. Now I can come in and select the bottom and top vertice, hit F, and then just hit W to select subdivide there, and that will allow me to start fleshing out the 3D shape. I'd like to add a bit more detail to my trace, so I'm just going to move that vertice up, select the top and bottom, and subdivide, and that will give me an extra vertice to work with and define the arc of the gas mask at the front. Now I'm going to select all the vertices in the middle besides the very top and bottom, and I'm going to extrude, but before I do that, I'm going to turn off clipping in the mirror modifier options, and then I can extrude away from the center. Keeping a close eye on my concept art, I'm just going to maneuver the vertices to match that shape as much as I can that David has drawn. To join the faces around the rim of the mask, I'll switch to edge select mode, and I can simply select 2 edges at a time and press F to join the faces quickly. Tweaking the shape a little more, looking at my concept art and seeing areas that look a little bit off that I can fix. And with the basic form there, now is a perfect time to add a subdivision surface, which is also known as subsurf for short. I'll just come into the toolbar and select smooth, and you'll notice sometimes some black lines appear when you smooth the mesh. By using the hotkey Ctrl N, Blender will auto-correct these normals to solve the problem. So then I can hit Ctrl R to add a loop cut, and then just grab the back vertices with Alt right click, and extrude out to form a small bevel extrusion. Just extruding, and I've scaled and moved the vertices back a little bit. I'll just make one more loop cut in the middle of the rim, and then move up some of the top vertices to cover the nose a bit better. I'm then going to grab some of those vertices on the middle rim cut and just move them in a bit to add a nice little arc there. Just working out ways to make the shape a little bit more interesting. So it's a simple shape, but it works. At this point I'm just going to turn on clipping because you can see here that there's a couple of vertices that escape the middle mirror point. So with clipping on I can just move them and they'll connect when they reach the center. So that's the gas mask done, and our next step will be to move on to the actual head cloth that wraps around his entire head and also covers the gas mask. Just make a couple of small tweaks before I move on. Lastly, I'll just change the subdivisions to 2. And there we go. The grid floor is getting in my way a bit, so if I go into the N properties and just uncheck grid floor, that'll turn that off. So I'm going to place the 3D cursor at the center of my face mesh again by selecting it, and Shift S, cursor to selection. And then I'm going to Shift A, add another mesh, circle. Hit T again, and down the bottom, change vertices to 12 this time. Once more, rotate so that the circle's facing my front view. And I'll rotate with R while holding Control and snap the vertices until there's a vertice at the very top and bottom. And that will allow me to once again delete the left side of the vertices and add another mirror modifier. I'm going to scale along the Y-axis just to get the vertices generally in the right spot, and then just using my profile reference, pull the vertices back to match up with the face mesh. And this is kind of like the area that he can see out of. I'll line up the bottom meshes here, just selecting 2 vertices and subdividing if I want an extra vertice. Sometimes an edge might go through the face and we need a bit more detail to hug the skin a bit better. I'll make sure to place those bottom vertices over the gas mask as well. With that trace done, I'm just going to grab the top vertice between his eyes and move it down at the back of his head there, at the top of his neck. I'm just going to select the edges and subdivide a few times. And I'm actually just going to select these 2 vertices, come down and hit X and delete the edge. And from there I can just extrude the vertices all the way around over his head, and then just join it to the top vertice again. Now I'll grab the bottom vertice at the mirror point and extrude that down to the front of his neck. I'll join the front and the back, subdivide once and twice, and finally again to have 3 in between vertices that I can pull outward in front view. And then in my profile view I can push the vertices forward and back to make sure the shape looks a bit more natural. Now grabbing the very side vertice from my original trace, I'm just going to join it to the back of his head there, make some subdivides, and guessing as best as I can, shape the back of his head there. I'll do some more subdividing to trace his chin, and just move the vertices to cover the gas mask in the most efficient way. A couple of tweaks here just to make sure that the cloth is going to look like it's sticking well enough to his skin. I've taken a little care with the placement of my vertices so that when I start adding faces, as I'm going to now, they'll line up well enough and I won't have too many vertices at the top or bottom. I can again switch to edge select mode and it can speed up the process. Once I get to a point where it might be a little bit tricky to join the faces so broadly, I just make a loop cut. Now I'd like to get rid of this gap here, so if I select the middle vertice first and then the second vertice there, I can hit Alt M and choose Merge at Last. And that will put my middle vertice and merge it to the mirror point and the back of our mask. That's gotten rid of the gap. Now I'm going to repeat the technique as I did for the back of the mask on the front. So I'm going to join these 2 vertices together in the middle here, and just move it out in front view so that it matches the shape of the face as if it were underneath. I'm going to make a subdivision where needed, just so that I can join these faces up. Again, joining faces as broadly as possible, with the intention of afterwards adding a horizontal loop cut to define the shape even more. Now just working on the bottom of the gas mask and the chin, making subdivisions as I need to. I'm going to add a loop cut down the bottom here. And I've got one too many vertices up the top, I think, so I'm going to Alt right click to select this loop and just hit X and delete edge loop. And that will free up some space at the top there and even the amount of vertices at the top and bottom so that I can continue adding faces. Mesh modeling is really a puzzle, and this part in particular has me a little stumped, so I usually just take a moment to have a look at the mesh, have a look where the vertices are, and where the loops are heading. And I can usually plan how to move forward, and after a while it usually comes to me, or maybe a bit of trial and error is required. This is all part of the blocking stage, and I've decided that I'm going to create an outline of the front of the mask here by going into the gas mask mesh and just selecting a loop there. And I'm going to duplicate it with Shift D, and it automatically moves for you, so I'm just going to right click to cancel that and put it back into the original position. And then by hitting P, I can separate the mesh from the object by choosing selection, and then it becomes its own object that I can join to the main mask mesh by selecting both of them and then pressing Ctrl J. And then it's just a matter of merging those two vertices together up the top. I've got this face going right through my outline, so I'm just going to merge these two vertices together and then delete the edge, so that I've got a nice fresh outline here that I can work from. I'm going to subdivide the top edge here, and that will allow me to join these vertices together and leaves enough vertices for one more quad. Now I'll do some work on the bottom here of the mask. Just tweak to my reference plates a little bit to get the roundness of the neck. By hitting 7 on the numpad, I can go to my top view, and that can help get an idea of the outline overhead of the neck. I'll just place this vertex as close as I can to the gas mask, and then I'm going to make a loop cut at the bottom and merge the vertex that was in the middle there to my trace. And now, since I'm working with the lower part of the face, and the plate is a little bit skewed as you get lower, I'm just going to adjust in the background image properties the X offset, and just play with that so the mouth is a little bit more in the center. And that will give me a bit more of an accurate reading of where to place things. I'm going to make another loop cut here vertically, and then just do some more merging so that any stray vertices can match up to that outline around the front of the gas mask. So now I'm going to have another attempt at joining the faces in this area, doing all I can to add in extra loop cuts to avoid making triangles, and keeping as many four-sided polygons as I can. And here I'll just make another loop cut, using Alt-S scale along normals just a little bit to smooth it out. And there I can join those vertices. So the blocking is basically done for the bottom of the mask. There are some intersections, so I'll have to work on that. First I'll just give it a quick material so that I can see the difference between the two objects. Just added a new material, and I'm going to make it a little bit darker. So now I can really see those intersections. I'll go to the modify options and add a subdivision surface and change the view subdivisions to 2. And from here, being able to see how my mesh looks subdivided, I can begin moving the vertices to get rid of the intersections. And just generally smooth out the mesh. Going to use smooth a couple of times, especially around the neck area, the outline at which the mesh ends and his neck will be. And now I'm just fleshing out the area coming from the gas mask to his cheek. And finally I'll just add a loop cut there in the middle so that I can make 2 quads. And some final tweaks just to try and get the mesh to follow his chin a bit more and match up with the gas mask a bit more naturally. My aim is going to be to have the cloth appearing as though it's being stretched a bit at the front of the gas mask and then getting pulled back over the face. So now I'm going to move on to the top area of the mask. I'll select these two vertices, add a face, and then subdivide. I'll then just pull out this middle vertice to define the maximum width of this area of his head. A couple of tweaks, and then I can just select two vertice chunks and subdivide and create some more vertices to define the shape. I'm wondering whether to add another horizontal cross section, but I decide maybe I'll go for adding the faces vertically at this point. So I've matched up the amount of vertices fine, and then all that's left is to just add the faces in and push any vertices that have escaped the mirror area. I'm paying attention to my front reference to make sure that the width of his head is kept consistent. All of this being done in blocking is so important, as when I add details later it will be much harder to change the fundamental shape. Now I'll just work up from the forehead area, selecting edges and joining them, and then adding edge loops to match the amount of horizontal loops that I need to connect faces to. And after making a horizontal loop cut, I'll just join these edges, subdivide, make a face, and just move the vertice up a bit. And that will give me some more vertices to work with. Now I've got some parts of my face mesh poking out of the mask base here, so what I'm going to do is just grab this outside row of vertices with Alt right click and just extrude them back into the head, and that will influence the subsurf to pull back a bit. And now there's just this one more gap here, and I just need one more horizontal cut, I notice, to match the vertices on the other side of the gap. There we go. And it's just a matter of joining the faces, making a loop cut in the middle, and then merging those vertices. Now to the top of the head, and I'll just join the edge of the gap and make faces that meet up at the mirror point there of my trace, and subdivide to add any more vertices as I need them. So you can see from those extra loop cuts I added, I needed to make some more vertices in my original trace. So at the back here, if I simply just added a face, that would make two tries, and I really don't want that. So I'm going to make a loop cut, Alt S to scale on the normals and really get a nice round shape there. Just pull the vertice back to make it more of a diamond shape. That just helps to smooth out the face a little bit more. Now this is a bit of a tricky area. If I come down and just delete one of the edges here and make a loop cut, it will only go to the point where my gap is, and I can worry about the other area later. I can make a diamond quad here, and get that to join up to the trace. I've still got one more vertice than I'd like there, so I have no choice, got to make a loop cut. And there's my quads. But I can smooth that out. Now I'm going to take care of this bottom area here. I'm going to delete all those horizontal edges. And just get the vertices there to match up with the amount above. Now I'm just going to select 4 vertices at a time And here I'm just going to select 4 again, skipping one of the vertices on the left. And then I can make some loop cuts and merge the vertices in the middle together. And one more. It's quite high density there, but I think we'll be okay. Now I'm just using proportional editing to push out some of the larger areas of the head. I imagine his ear is going to be there, so I just push those vertices out a bit. I imagine the back area is going to have a bit of a bandana effect, so if I delete these vertices, there'll be this gap where the cloth is tied at the bottom and then kind of flaps over the back. So I'm going to extrude those vertices out there and join the faces to meet at the bottom of the gap. We'll add more detail to that later. And finally, I just need to do the cloth here at the front. So I'm going to grab all of those edges and extrude them to the middle of the mirror point so that they merge automatically. And then just merge the top and bottom vertices together. And lastly, switch to face select mode. And if I hit E to extrude, it will automatically pull out on the normals a bit. I'll confirm that, and then just scale down a bit to add a bit of a bevel. It might be a bit too much, so I can just scale down a little bit more and then translate it across the axis, across the y-axis a bit to push it out a bit. That's looking pretty good. I'll just make some final tweaks. The further away I push these vertices from each other, of course, the less the bevel is. And I can play with that until I'm happy. Got to keep an eye on intersections. The aim is that later on when rendering, the mask will show up just underneath the mask cloth. So that's why I've modeled the gas mask itself. My aim here is to have the cloth sort of fold over itself, and that's why the corner bit of the eye there is so sharp. So I'm just going to press V to split these vertices away. So you can see they're in the same spot, but if I move them up a bit, you can see that they're actually separated. Now I'm going to carefully move the vertices that were already selected inward a bit and then down. And then I'll switch to edge selection mode and join them to the edges that I split them away from originally. At the end here there's one more gap that's a try, so I've just made a loop cut so that I can form a diamond quad at the end there. I'm going to make one more cut and just Alt S to give it a bit of volume, as if the cloth is sort of folding over itself, but it's a little bit thick, so there is some rounding off there. I decided to delete that edge loop that I made before, just because there were too many vertices at the point where the folding ends. But it seems to work quite well with this amount. So you can see the cloth at the top there tucks underneath. And that looks quite good. So that's part 1 done, blocking the mesh. Now let's move on to part 2 and start adding some cloth folds and wrinkles.